Alright, today's subject is multilateralism. Welcome back to Straight Talk from Paris. It's been a little while since I've posted. But I wanted to talk about something today which has been on my mind a lot, in part because I'm studying it in school. In my master's degree, we focus quite a bit on multilateral institutions, the European Union, United Nations, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and several other institutions, free trade agreements, the WTO, the World Trade Organization. It's been really fascinating to get a perspective of some of these people, people who have either studied or worked in these institutions for much of their lives, and to try to figure out, okay, what's working, what's not. But the most important thing about multilateral institutions and multilateralism is that it works. And that's the point I want to make this evening, more than any other point, more than how to make them work or what to do with them, is that they work. And they work in contrast to the bilateral vision which is being proposed by the American administration and by other actors throughout the world right now. There's this sense coming from quite a few nationalists that the national interest comes first, and the best way for a national government to negotiate, to deal with the world, is through bilateral methods. So the national government should have negotiations with each separate country on trade and on foreign policy and on peace and military, and each of those negotiations should be done with each country separately. Especially a strong country like the United States or Russia should negotiate in a bilateral format. And I just think that is mad. I just think it's mad, and let me explain. A few reasons why. First and foremost, the problems that we face today are bigger than any nation can handle, bigger than the United States can handle, bigger than China can handle, bigger than the European Union, which is not even one country, can handle by themselves. We need each other. The United States needs China, and China needs the United States. France needs Britain, and Britain needs France, and Britain also needs Nigeria and India and Brazil and many other countries to be on board with the solutions to some of these problems. What problems? Nuclear, armament. How about, many of the treaties which were governing nuclear arms are being broken now by the US administration and others. Why is that wise? Why don't we have multilateral agreements on nuclear arms? The Iran agreement is another example of a multilateral agreement, which was, at least in some views and in my view, protecting the Middle East. While imperfect, while it could have been improved, to scrap it altogether is mad. Climate change agreements are another example. Now, of course, I think there are better ways of tackling climate change, like development and funding investment in green technology, which would be wiser than climate change agreements, but they are a start. Why not start there? Why not work multilaterally? Anyway, so the first thing is that there are problems like nuclear armament, like climate change, like trade barriers and investment, like the transition to green energy, like the transition, like unemployment, and like offshoring of jobs. These are all problems that can't be solved within a country anymore. The United States no longer has the ability, because of technology and because of improvements in transportation, the United States no longer has the ability to insist that companies produce within the United States. Another example is the concentration of wealth. We have people making their money in the United States or France or wherever, and then taking vast sums, millions or billions of dollars, and sending them out of the country and not paying taxes on them. Corporations are doing the same thing, actually. Because of the digital enablement of finance, and because of the very intelligent people working at banks, they're able to do this, banks and other institutions, they're able to do this, take their money out of the countries where they make it, not pay taxes on it, and put it outside of the country until an administration like the current administration in the United States comes in, lowers the taxes, and boom, they can bring it back at half price. And then of course, which is fantastic for the company, which is fantastic for shareholders, but which is not fantastic for the common person who needs their social security funded, who needs roads to drive on, who needs all of these things that the government provides and can't provide if it doesn't get the right amount of taxes from these companies and from these individuals. So, multilateralism is necessary first and foremost because we have multilateral problems. Now, second, multilateralism is necessary because closing off to the outside world, not closing off to the outside world, but closing off to multilateral agreements creates tension. If you have every country negotiating on its own with each country, any kind of an antagonistic style which is preferred by some of the current world leaders, including the U.S. administration, but also I think including to some degree Russia and China and other actors who sort of like to use their size or their political clout to bully others, especially smaller nations, to do what they want, that creates antagonistic relationships. It creates structures of power which create injustice and which create enmity, which creates a sense in which I have been wronged. Little country says, I have been wronged. I need to get back at this bigger country. What if I can get so-and-so on my side? And then we start getting the alliances which led us into World War I. I mean, it was exactly... World War I started in the Balkans, in former Yugoslavia, because the former Yugoslavia was trying to get free of the Ottoman Empire, and Russia had a beef with the Ottoman Empire, and Britain had a beef with the Ottoman Empire, and Germany had a beef with Russia, and so everybody started aligning against each other, and suddenly you have these two grand alliances which are forced into battle because all of them had been negotiating one-on-one in antagonistic ways about empire, about territory, about freedom, about religion, and all of a sudden all of it coalesced into this grand unnecessary war. Whereas if you take modern institutions, the United Nations and the World Trade Organization in particular, they are organizations of almost every nation on Earth. And as much as the US and China may disagree on certain subjects, they're constantly talking through the WTO, through the UN, and through, hopefully, other multilateral institutions as well. They're forced to always talk, and with other people present, not just to negotiate back and forth on one or two disagreements that they have, but to constantly be talking in constructive ways. Multilateralism preserves peace and prevents war, as uncomfortable as it may be. And third, and most importantly for me, because I am a patriot, an American, a U.S. citizen, and a fan of, as unpopular as the opinion sometimes is, a fan of U.S. leadership in the world, I think multilateralism needs to be defended because it is the only way in the modern world that the United States can maintain leadership. And for that matter, anyone else, if China wants to be a leader in the modern world, it will work multilaterally. It won't be able to dictate to the rest of the world what it wants. Those days are past. The Roman Empire sort of did that, and sort of fell because it did. Because it refused to negotiate with the barbarians on the outside of Rome. The barbarians eventually overran and overcame Rome. And of course there are many reasons for it, but it's an example of a country that tried to use its power and its force to maintain its position, its status in the world, and failed to do so. It's simply impossible to maintain power, especially when other economies are getting so big relative to the United States economy. It's impossible to maintain leadership, world leadership, and thus be able to preserve the liberal order that has been fashioned and achieved and strengthened through U.S. leadership in the past 60 years, as imperfect as U.S. leadership has been. To maintain that order will require multilateralism. It will require strengthening the European Union rather than cheering for its downfall. It will require strengthening the United Nations and making it more democratic rather than cheering for it rather than wanting the U.S. to essentially get out of the UN if it can't get its way. This is, to me, an extremely important point because the problems that we face are global. many of the problems that we face are global. Because many of the solutions to the problems we have are global. Because war will be avoided best by multilateral agreements. The most important thing the United States can do is remain in and strengthen multilateral institutions. Work multilaterally. Multilaterally being with multiple nations at the same time. With China and Russia at the same time. What if there was a free trade agreement with China and Russia inside it besides the WTO? Or, just thinking outside the box here. Or what if we had cooperation between the United States and China on the One Belt, One Road policy, instead of the United States lambasting the Chinese government for neo-colonial efforts and neo-colonial work with the One Belt, One Road project. What if the U.S. cooperated with, created a worldwide investment fund based on the One Belt, One Road policy, but which would maybe be more just and more fair and more transparent in its dealings? Again, there are many ways to maintain U.S. leadership. There are many things which need to be done. We still need to invest in military. We still need to build our alliances with other countries. We still need to strengthen our own economy so that we can be a leader in the world. But one of the things that needs to be done is continue to invest in multilateralism. We can't back away from it. This is not the time to back away from it. The world is only getting smaller and flatter and more polluted, and the problems are only getting more global and faster to reach us through digital technology. We can't afford to back away from alliances, to back away from trade agreements, as imperfect as they may be. That's the point. The United Nations is an extremely imperfect institution. But that doesn't make it an institution that we need to leave. It makes it an institution we need to reform. And when we get that through our thick skulls, when we get that leadership in the modern world only comes through multilateralism, we will begin an American Renaissance in world affairs.